I am glad to be here today. I'm excited for what you're all going to do this year. I think it's one of the most important parts of the college experience. One thing I've been really impressed with about Bethel that's different from the other college campuses I've worked on is just how supportive the environment is here for students. As I was getting a tour and learning about the different departments, and they talked about, oh, if a student is, drops below this level, an email goes to this advisor, and they meet with the advisor, and the advisor makes a plan. And I think, man, every other school I've been at, it's just sink or swim. It really seems to be a really neat, caring environment, and I'm excited for your part in that caring environment. Very cool. A lot of people want to know, what do you do as a ESL teacher? What does that mean? And so I found a short video to help explain a little bit about what I do. So this is a short video called The Translator. Many people wonder, how many languages, Erica, do you speak? This is probably one of the most common questions I get. This video will hopefully help describe that. You need to listen carefully. It's a British video, so the main gal has a British accent, and she talks about doing TEFL in her gap year. So TEFL stands for Teaching English as a Foreign Language. So she, during a year break from her university experience, taught English as a foreign language, which has qualified her to be a translator at her new job. So let's take a quick look at this.
You right?
No, I'm having a bit of a nightmare, actually.
What's the matter?
Well, I've had all the international CEOs from around the world in this room. In 10 minutes, the annual summit's supposed to take place. They've flown thousands of miles to get here, and my translator hasn't turned up. I need to find someone who can translate into 7 different languages.
Well, I can do that. Yeah, I did the TEFL in my gap year.
Welcome back to London, ladies and gentlemen. This is Helen Marsh, who'll be our interpreter today. So, without further ado, let's address section 1.1, multinational profiteering for the financial year 2005-2006. Helen.
Hurdy-gurdy-gurdy. Hurdy-gurdy-gurdy-gurdy. Gurdy. Oh, bud. Oh, bud.
Che cosa ta dici, vado
This is not my sandwich.
So clearly this is not how you would like to approach your tutoring session come this fall. And I admit this is a very, very stereotyped video. So I debated whether or not I would show it even, because some people, I have a few friends who are offended by it, but I think it's worth looking at, because I know we all kind of, in your head, you walk through the grocery store, you hear a sound, you don't know what they're saying, you can kind of guess what language it might be, it plays off of things that we've heard of and ideas we have about how languages sound. And as you enter into this experience of meeting with multilingual students, you're going to need to put on your language listening ears, because the way they speak English is going to sound different than what you're used to. So while I can't speak 7 languages, what I can do, what my degree does qualify me to do, is to help tell you a little bit more about some of the uniquenesses, some generalizations about multilingual students. And we can make some generalizations. First of all, one unique thing about the United States is that we do have students that come from all over the world. And these students, many of them arrive while they're still in the middle school, elementary, or even high school age group. And so they've been through our school system. And that allows them to acquire language skills through immersion. As opposed to maybe those of you that are studying a foreign language here, you're studying it academically. And so when you learn by immersion, the result is you have much better oral, which is speaking, and oral, which is listening skills, than you do literacy skills. This is my case when I lived in China for 6 years. I was very good at getting around everywhere. I could make my point known. I knew lots of cultural idioms, and yet I could read none of it, because I didn't need to read or write on a daily basis. I talked with Chinese people all the time, and even my reading and writing was very specific. It was Bible language, which isn't always super helpful when you're sitting on the subway and the person next to you wants to talk about politics. Another thing that can be true about multilingual students is that the move to the U.S. for them might not have been a choice, but rather the result of political or economic situations. This is unique because when they arrive here, they may not have finished literacy in their first language. Imagine that you in middle school, elementary school, are ripped out of your schooling experience. So your ability to read, write, think in English is at maybe a 3rd or 4th grade level. And now you're in a new country and you need to start. You need to not only learn the language and the idioms and make friends, but you're needing to learn reading and writing skills as well. And so when your language learning, your academic learning in your first language is interrupted, it affects your ability to do that in another language. Another thing that's unique about these students is that they may have a different socioeconomic status than those who have come to the U.S. by choice as an international student. International students have often been saving all of their life, or their parents have been saving all of their life. They have job skills. They often come alone, so they're just worried about themselves. But for these immersed students, they have come out of a situation where they have no money. Their parents may have worked 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and then gone to language school themselves till 8 at night. And so this student grew up in a home perhaps where their parents weren't available. Or they themselves may now be the provider. They might be taking care of their elderly parents. There might be an aunt or uncle in the house. They might need to go to school while working a full-time job as well. And so you can imagine if you're trying to work 40 hours and carry a full load at school so that you can finish in 4 years, your parents live at home, you might have a kid running around your ankles. That makes it really hard to study and hard to find a quiet place where you can get your papers done, your homework done, even difficult to find time to meet with a tutor. Some learners could be literate in English. Their first language may be a different variety of English than North American English. For example, Liberian English. Liberian students, people consider English as their first language, but it's a different variety than American English. Does anybody recognize where these 3 flags come from? Can you name any of them? Extra bonus points and stars star stickers to those who might be able to guess. This is Liberia, this is Singapore, and this is Sierra Leone, all of which would say English is their first language, but it's going to sound really different from your English or mine. So you'll notice on the purple paper that you have is the left column here, you can jot down some of the unique things about the learners, and then the next part is, how does this affect academic learning? Your paper says, how does this affect writing? But really, it affects all areas of learning, not just writing. And the first thing that it has an effect on is that because they have oral fluency, they might write like they speak. We speak very differently than when we write. And these students had to learn scholarly or academic language. At the same time, they learned slang. And often the speaking comes first because that's what they did every day to meet friends, to get around. And so they write like they speak. There's often not that distinction between the words you might use academically and the words you would use in your everyday language. Another thing, the socioeconomic status can create difficulties, as we said, in finding time to study, finding a place to study. There might not be a desk at home for them to study at. Here at school, many of you will live on campus. You've probably got a desk in your residence hall room. There's a library with tables. A lot of the multilingual students, because they can be non-traditional, will not live on campus but live at home. They may or may not have a quiet place to even study. So this socioeconomic status can affect that. Students might view themselves as fluent. If you speak Liberian English, you are a fluent English speaker. So in your mind, you might not have this mindset that I need to see a tutor because of language problems. They might be sitting in a math class or a science class feeling overwhelmed with the content, and they themselves don't realize that overwhelmed feeling is because of a language barrier. They might think, gosh, I'm so dumb, I don't understand this math, or this science is so hard, I don't get it. When really the real problem is a language barrier, not a math or a science barrier. One thing that this can tend to affect too is that this student has added responsibilities in their family that perhaps you don't have. One of the gals that I work with came to the U.S. when she was 3 years old. So her English is clearly fluent. She's at the U of M. She has a full ride scholarship. She's accepted into the med school program. She's a brilliant gal. But she has unique responsibilities in her family. She is the cultural insider. Anytime her parents need help, she is obligated to help them. They just bought a new house out in Woodbury. Who do you think it was that helped out with the mortgage and the bank? Have any of you done that? So this is a heavy burden on some of these multilingual students' shoulders. So as you meet with them, keep that in the back of your mind if you get frustrated, like, why aren't they getting this? Or why don't they just spend more time with this at home? Why don't they study the number of hours I study? This is their reality. Their parents don't get it. Their parents don't get how long it takes them to learn something. For their parents, getting that mortgage signed is more important. Or the aunt that comes into town all of a sudden and needs to be picked up at the airport. Who gets to go do it? Your kid gets to go do it. She knows the airport. She can speak English. She can navigate her way around. Honey, you go do that. Oh, you have a paper due tonight? Oh, you can do that later. Or just turn it in a couple days. They won't mind. So this is kind of what some of these multilingual students are facing. So I've thought through some of the problems they might have, and I've divided them into two areas. One is macro level problems that they might face. The other is micro level. We're going to look at a few macro level issues that students with multiple languages face. We'll look at three areas. One, they have different models of academic writing and reasoning, different than the linear way that we tend to think and speak. They may have different value systems about writing and the way assignments work. And they may have some difficulty interpreting the language of assignments. First of all, let's look at different models of academic writing. And this writing is across the board. Whether you're in a science class or a history class, you're going to need to write papers. And this is going to affect the student as they reason and think through the paper. Let me throw out this question to you. What would you say, you've been given an assignment to write a paper for a class, how would that writing look? What do you do first? What's the first thing you write in your paper? A title, an introduction. Where are you going to see your thesis statement? In the introduction, yeah. It's going to look something like this hamburger. The bread at the top is your thesis. That comes first. Then we've got the support and the reasoning. And then we have a conclusion. The conclusion is also bread, because your conclusion is kind of a restatement of your thesis, right? It wraps it all up. This is what we're hoping to see. This nice linear ... But this is what you may see when your multilingual student comes in, a different kind of reasoning. They may start out broad, give some details, and finally, at the very end of their paper, end up with a thesis. You might really have to dig to find out what their thesis is. For example, it could be a nursing student, and they start out by talking about nursing in general, why they like nursing, nursing is important, every country needs nursing. Then they might narrow it a little bit here, talking about different types of nursing. For example, nursing care in a nursing home or for elderly people. Then they get down to the main topic, which would be care for the elderly specific. And then their thesis statement happens to be end-of-life decisions. How do we make decisions about the end of our life? That comes way at the bottom. That's completely flip-flopped from our way of reasoning and thinking. And it's not bad, it's not wrong, but if they want to succeed in the American university system, they need to learn how to do it this way. We also have different qualities in an essay. What would you say are some of the general qualities that make a good essay? If your professor gave you a paper back and said, "Oh, this is a great essay," what things would be true about that essay? It's been a long summer. Yeah, and feel free to just shout things out. Go ahead.
Cohesive.
It's cohesive, yeah.
It flows well.
It flows well. Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts? It's concise, yeah. There's no random tangents.
Clear purpose.
A clear purpose. Yeah, exactly. So we've got some of this. We're straightforward, we're concise. The ideas are owned. It's your own ideas, or if it's not your idea, you've stated whose idea it is. It's straightforward, it's linear. You're going to show your individual thinking, your point of view. Your teacher wants to know, what do you think about this? And have you integrated the ideas from class into your own ideas? In contrast, other cultures, they don't want to hear your own ideas. In some places, this is dangerous. It's dangerous to disagree with the professor in some countries. You don't want to challenge the status quo. Who are you? You're just a student. This professor has been studying this topic for a long, long time. And so your job is to repeat what the professor said. They may value more metaphorical writing, writing where things are symbolic, where you don't say it straight out, but you give some sort of analogy for the paper to get your point across. Here, in North American writing, we're explicit. You just say it. I don't know if you've ever heard your professor say, tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you told them, right? Tell them. We're very explicit. We don't want the reader to have to do a lot of work. In other cultures, the burden is on the reader. to figure out what the meaning is. And so if it's metaphorical or circular, going around and around, that's totally okay. Here, they're often inductive. The main idea is stated at the end. This affects all kinds of disciplines. In science in the United States, usually we state our hypothesis first, right? Then we state our supports for that. In other cultures, it might be upside down. We state the supports, and then you get to what is your hypothesis. So these things don't affect just writing. They affect math, they affect science, they affect history. Finally, ideas are shared. I see this in my classes that I teach at Hub Center all the time. And it's really fun to watch the different cultures and how they'll approach an assignment. I have some cultures, even on important standardized tests, certain of the women will sit together, and these women come from an oral tradition where everything is talked about and passed down through talking. And the ladies will sit and discuss, what did you get for this, what did you get? And I'll look at them, and they know they're not supposed to talk about it. And then they stop, and then I'll walk over here, and then I look, and here they are discussing it again. And so this is just what they're used to doing. They don't come from a concept of a standardized test where you need to show your own work, where it's about what you do. In their culture, it's a community effort. These two differences, ideas are owned and ideas are shared, comes up in another way. I'm wondering if you can think of a way that this might be a problem in the American university. Plagiarism? Yes, plagiarism. So while we feel very, very strongly about this, other cultures often don't get it. And so this is something that you need to help them understand. The importance of citations, the importance of giving credit where credit is due, is often a new concept. And they've come through the American school system. They've maybe been at a community college even before they came here to Bethel. But it's still something to get used to. How to cite, when to cite, what's your idea, and what's somebody else's idea is really important. The third area that students have trouble with is interpreting an assignment. And I'd like to have you discuss with someone sitting next to you. I'm going to split this room in half, okay? I'd like this half to just talk to the person sitting next to you. If your professor gave you this first assignment, what would you need to know in order to do it successfully? And then this half, talk with a partner. If your professor gave you the second assignment, what would you need to know in order to successfully complete this assignment? Take just a couple minutes to talk about that together, okay? And then I'll ask for your feedback. I'd like to hear from a few people on this side. What do you think? And if you were given the assignment to imagine that you need to interview the author of a book you've read, what would you ask the author? How would this author respond in return? Consider the author's background and the themes throughout the book to create a dialogue. What would you need to know to complete this? Yeah?
The first thing I thought of was you need to know what your professor means by dialogue.
Yeah. What the heck is a dialogue? Good. What else?
We were thinking about asking the author what it was that inspired their writing or what happened in their life that kind of led up to this book.
Sure. You need to know something about the author's background.
And the basic themes of the books, just be able to create questions that match with what we're thinking about.
Yeah. And before you could know the themes, you need to know what a theme is. Yeah. Anything else? I think in order to do this, there's a lot of skills you need to have. It's going to have a specialized format, right? It's not going to be your hamburger essay. So here you've been learning. Okay, thesis statement first, paragraph, support, conclusion, and now your professor throws this at you, and they want a dialogue. how do you write an essay in a dialogue format? That's totally different. You're going to need to guess. You're going to need to make some hypothetical guesses about what this author might say. That's hard. It's hard for anybody, but if you're from another culture, you might think, how can I say what that person would say? I'm lying. That's not what they would really say. I'm lying. You need to understand the concept of an imagination and imaginatory writing. And you need to understand there is no strict right or wrong answer with this. In many cultures, when you go to school, there is a right answer and there's a wrong answer. It's black and white. This does not have a right or a wrong answer. It's your own opinion what the author would say. So that's a whole new concept. How about the second one? Explain the following data giving an appropriate justification for your categories by using the charts above. What do you need to do to answer this?
You might need to know what the professor qualifies as an appropriate justification.
Yeah. Yeah, how do you justify something? That's a big academic word, isn't it? What else?
Also to connect the justification with, like, by using the charts above.
Yeah.
Connecting those pieces.
Exactly, tying them together.
The context from which the data came from.
Where did it come from?
You have to know how to read a chart.
Exactly, you have to know how to read a chart. This is a very Western world sort of thing. The concept where there is data along one side and data along the top, and you follow them together to get to a specific number is a Western concept. So that might be a new thing. So you may be teaching people how to read a chart and then how to make that leap to justifying something. That how to tie in their opinions about what they think about this chart to concrete reasons. It's a skill that we have to all learn. So those are the macro level. There are also some micro level problems that students have, and these are more of the little things. Things like when I'm writing a response, I might have trouble with things like and the, and when to use them. I might have trouble with prepositions. Prepositions are probably one of the #1 difficult things for multilingual students. And the, there's some pretty good rules for that. It's still hard, but prepositions, why do we choose in or on? It's just kind of a gut feeling that a lot of us have, you know? Start to pay attention to how often you use prepositions in a sentence and why do you use what you use, and sometimes they don't make any sense at all. Infinitives. You know, why do we say I would like to have a car someday, but not I will to have a car someday? Why can I use an infinitive here, but not here? Students are going to have trouble with things like that. They're going to have trouble with the wrong parts of speech. They're going to say, I am exciting instead of I am excited. I have students all the time say, I am scary, when they mean I am scared. It's a common problem. Another difficulty that they have is agreement. They forget the S on plurals. That's a pretty easy fix. They might have the wrong tense. Or it might be something where we just don't say it like that. A little grammar humor for you. The dog is learning how to conjugate his verb. Woof, woofs, woofing. Yesterday I woofed. So what do you do then? How do you get started? I have just a few tips so that when you sit down and you meet with somebody and you start to think, aha, this may be a language issue. What can I do? I think the first thing I usually do is I try to prioritize. What's the biggest thing going on here? Ask the student, where's your assignment? What is the assignment? Because when they verbally tell you the assignment, if they've misinterpreted the assignment, you're only going to help them prepare a great misinterpretation of the assignment. So ask to see the actual assignment that the teacher gave them and read it over yourself before you start to look at whatever worksheets or paper that they have for you. Try and figure out Have they misinterpreted? And if they have, help them figure out what they are actually supposed to do. One of the biggest problems I've seen over in the AESC is that they have the wrong format of something. It's the wrong paragraph format, the teacher wants it in a certain order, they've got it in the wrong order because they've misinterpreted it. So if I spend my whole time fixing where they've said instead of the, or adding s's on the end of the words, it really doesn't do that student very much help. They've still got the big assignment wrong. So focus on the big things first. Look for patterns. You don't need to go through a paper and correct every little S and dot every little I and whatnot for them. That's their job. If you notice, though, that they're having the same problem over and over, you might want to jot a little list for them so that then they can go find another cultural insider. Any friend of theirs in their class can fix their uhs and thus and put the s's on the end of their words for them. That's not your job. You're trained more than that. So you might want to come up with some sort of marking method. You know, don't correct every misspelled word. They can look that up in the dictionary. Just put a little line under it. Let them know, hey, anything that's underlined, go check a dictionary or ask a friend about. You don't have that much time with this student. You'll eat up all your time if you fix every spelling mistake. Focus on the big things. This, I think, is a helpful concept. Try and figure out if their problems are lying with bricks and mortar issues. Let me explain what this is to you. When you go to school, you learn all kinds of academic language. The bricks of languages are the technical terms you learn for each of the different disciplines. Science, you're going to learn what respiration and transpiration is. You're going to learn about imagery and metaphor in your literature classes. There are usually concrete definitions for a lot of these. So is the student you're meeting with having trouble understanding some of these basic bricks that make up the class? The mortar, that's the stuff that goes between the bricks and sticks it all together. These are words like consequently, therefore, however, this is derived from, it ends up with. There's different mortar words for each academic discipline. And if you don't know the mortar words, you can't stick together the bricks, the language for that. And this, once again, it comes out in writing, but you also see it in a math assignment. You know, the professor might say, such and such is derived from this. Give an explanation of why. If they don't know the meaning of derived from, if they can't, in these academic terms, explain it, they're going to have trouble with the assignment. So figure out, does the student need to know more of these special language words to go with this discipline? The next one, don't assume you know what they're trying to say. Sometimes I'll read a student's paper or paragraph and I'll think, aha, they're trying to say this and it just doesn't make sense. But then I take time to probe a little bit more. A good phrase is, can you tell me more about this? And as I probe and they get to kind of talk it out, I figure out, oh, what they're saying does really fit with the overall assignment. It just didn't come out in English the way they want it to. So then it's a matter of helping them get a few sentences down in more academic language that they can then plug into whatever they're doing. Lastly, empathize with them. This is hard. English is a crazy language. It's hard even for native speakers. I would encourage those that you meet with in any way that you can. We could all use more encouragement. A good phrase that I often use to try and affirm them is, you've really got this concept well. There's something that's worth affirming. You've got this well. Now let's find a way we can put it in the right place. Or now let's look at another concept that's not going so well. So along with any kind of constructive thing, try and balance it out with something that they're doing well at. You might say, hey, this example in your paper is really great. I really think we should use it. Let's find a better spot to put it in your paper. Because they've got a good thing, they've got a good example, it's just not in the best place. So help them move it to a new place. I think Romans 12:15 really fits here. It's rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. Rejoice with them. Be excited about the things that they've got going well. And then I say moan, not just mourn, but moan. This is so hard. I agree. It's really hard. Because sometimes that's what we need the most. When you're having a rotten assignment day, when things are really hard and you just don't want to spend another minute on this, empathize with them and mourn with how difficult things are. So I know as you dive in, you're going to find more questions that you have. Coming soon to a tutoring session near you, we'll have another talk about principles of communication. What can help you in dialoguing with these learners? And then also the help, this paper has so many issues, I don't know where to begin session, because you will face that too. I face that. Sometimes I get a paper and I'm like, where do I even start? This is just so jumbled up. I want you to know that I'm available to help you. I'm in the Ask Center from 11:30 to 2:30. Feel free to pop in and ask me a question, or send me an email if you've met with a student and you're like, what should I have done? How could I have approached this? Consider yourself a learner in this whole process. As you're dealing with some of these micro issues, maybe of grammar, your gut is going to know if they wrote it wrong, because you're a native speaker. But it might be difficult to say why it's wrong. And the student might ask. Don't feel pressured to have an answer. It is okay to say, I don't know. That's a great question. Isn't English crazy? I don't really know. Let me get back to you on that. And then go find out, because it's a good way for you to learn as well. And so I think that about concludes our time. Thanks so much for listening today, and I hope the rest of your training goes well.